Welcome back and hello if you are new. Now I hope all of you guys have had a really fantastic week. Theatricality has long since been a real staple in the world of metal. From the days of King Diamond and Iron Maiden, storytelling has always been a really big part of the metal ethos. But also something over time I think that's infiltrated metal is the idea of horror. Having previously looked at Ouija boards, the Flying Dutchman, domestic violence and the horrors of war, Carach Angren this time fixed their gaze on their own interpretation of not quite the Mary Shelley classic, but something that definitely derives from that, which is the idea of the monster. And it's this questioning behind the true essence of what it is to be a monster on their brand new album Franckensteina Strataemontanus. If you're not familiar with Carach Angren, the band are a Dutch project that combine a ghoulish concept with kind of like a symphonic black metal soundtrack, essentially. In terms of story, I would hate to kind of ruin it for you, but Franckensteina Strataemontanus basically looks at the ideas of Frankenstein, but also Johann Dippel, who created Dippel's oil and his endless search for the elixir of life, which doesn't quite go according to plan. There are many incarnations of monsters on this record. Serial killers, zombies, the actual monster itself that was created, the monster that you've become in search of, this want for bringing the dead back to life. But at the center of it, all of them revolve around Johann Dippel, which kind of brings the story together. But the band aren't afraid to kind of go into the past, the present, and even the future. That's one of, I think, the biggest points for me on this album, is that it's not necessarily just a straight story that we might have seen on like Death Came from a Phantom Ship or This Is No Fairy Tale. But it's also not individual little vignettes at the same time that you would have seen on Where the Corpses Sink Forever or on Dance and Laugh Amongst the Rossen. As you can imagine, lyrics are a huge part of Carach Angren's kind of appeal. And Seragor's delivery, I think, is a really important thing for you to really understand the lyrics and what's kind of essentially going on. But then there's also these really great theatrical elements which are put in there. For example, on The Necromancer, which has some fantastic sections where, like, Seragor kind of screams like, "It's alive!" But I think on this record, things have kind of really slowed down a little bit. And there's a lot more kind of ebb and flow, even more so really, because you're telling a story, so you always want to kind of represent that with the music. But particularly on Monster and also Franckensteina Strataemontanus, and it has this more ominous industrial sort of sense to it, which I think is something new that the band hadn't incorporated previously. I also think that there's more of a focus on melody and repetition in particular. Skull with a Forked Tongue, for example, has some brilliant melodies, with Ardek being in charge of all of the compositional arrangements. Literally from the moment you hear Here in German Woodland right up into Like a Conscious Parasite I Roam, it has that sense of kind of sweeping you away, and it sounds as much like the beginning and the ending of a film, really. The music also, relates to what's happening and tells a story. For example, in Operation Compass, there's a section where the dead are kind of reanimated and the final riff is very sort of slow and lugubrious, similar to like, those kind of slow zombie walks. But then you've also got Der Vampir von Nuremberg, which is a lot more kind of, it's faster, but also has a bit more of a carnival sort of approach to it. And you've also got a sense of melancholy, for example, on Sown for Solitude, which is where the monster realizes it's been created and then is essentially outcast. I also think it's really cool for some of the long-time fans, as there's little nods to different parts of their discography. Like, for example, on Operation Compass, it opens with this sort of like introduction that was recorded on tape, which reminded me of an ominous recording. And there are some riffs that reminded me of like Lam and Dam and a bit more of those aggressive sort of sections. Perhaps my only sort of downside to this album would be that the production can sometimes be a little bit fluffy. And I think if it was maybe a bit clearer, it might have had a bit more impact in certain areas. On Franckensteina Strataemontanus, Carach Angren have tightened up their storytelling, their songwriting and their atmosphere to deliver one of the strongest records of their career so far, and a real monster. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this album review. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button. I've also got an interview with Ardek and Sarah Gore, which will be going up next week. Drop a comment as well, as I'm always keen to hear what you guys think, what you'd like to see on my channel, all that sort of stuff. But other than that, I hope all of you guys are safe and sound, and I will see you very, very soon for another album review. Take care, friends.